Good evening and welcome to the show. This is the First Amendment, historically speaking, and I will be your host. My name is Frederick Douglass Dixon, and again, I want to welcome all and thank UPTV for this time to allow us to speak about esoteric informations in a manner that will hopefully raise the awareness of the masses of those of us who happen to be able to see what we're doing here today, and maybe you can tell someone about the intent. And the intent is to expose, to put things on the table that will cause us to be far more historically accurate and pay more attention to our history. There is a coined term by a very wise man who said, those of us who do not master our history are bound and doomed to repeat it. So this particular small time that we have, we want to make sure that we tackle some of those issues that will allow future generations to be a whole lot better than what we are right now. And in light of 2014 and some of the amazing things that have happened in 2014 and setting the pace for 2015 and literally saying what it is that's important, I want to go to the idea of the movie Selma, the things that happened historically during that time, and an overview to what we call Black History Month. So with the movie Selma, please get out and take those young people, and the youngest is the most important, to view this movie. We want you to view it accurately. We want you to be able to view it as having entertainment, but let it be a link to you going back to research Dr. Martin Luther King in this particular episode as being very vital, as just one particular caveat of American history. American history in itself is continuing to evolve, although we may not like some of the things that have come in American history, and I certainly do not agree with some of the things that have happened in the near past. When we speak about Eric Gardner and we speak about Mike Brown, those are horrific situations that America has now, for the most part, water under the bridge. So we want to make sure that we keep those thoughts in clear view of what they do to ferment and create a situation for the near future. So when we talk about Black History Month, February is the month of the year that we celebrate Black History Month. But I must tell you all, Black history is celebrated every day somewhere, because we have had so many great individuals and groups who have gone on in American history to do great things, that there is no one month that can curtail or compass these particular thoughts. So I'd like to go to the history of Black History Month, which in itself is upcoming, and we should be very attuned to some of the things that have happened, which will make it a clearer February and maybe perhaps even more appreciated. So the first thing is to remove a myth. Removing the myth about why February was chosen for Black History Month. Well, we know as the days of the months, as just strictly with the numbers, February is the month that has the shortest amount of days. So to remove the myth of why Black History Month is in February, we have to look to the father of Black History Month, Dr. Carter Godwin Woodson. Dr. Carter G. Woodson in himself is an institution. Dr. Carter G. Woodson in himself is one who is a hero. So for all of you young people who look to main media for your hero, today is a day that we will provide you someone who should be taken as a hero, and very seriously. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson, a very amazing man. His work still lingers as very important and imperative, and even classic works. Classic works, for a functional definition of the word classic. When we speak of written work, a classic written work is as important today as the time that it was written. So going to Dr. Carter G. Woodson, we need to make sure that Dr. Carter G. Woodson is put in his proper light. Born in 1875 and was the son of former slaves. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson was known to work in coal mines in the state of West Virginia. He was also known to be so very brilliant that he was, for the most part, one who was self-learned for quite some time during his early life, up until right around the time he was 20 years old. Now he goes and finds out that there is a high school being built in Huntington, West Virginia, strictly for blacks. And this inspires him. So with Dr. Carter G. Woodson being inspired about education and looking to be formally educated after hard work in the coal mines, which only allowed him to go to school part-time at best. So this was a person who was self-taught. This was a person who knew about hard labor. And this was a person who at 20 years old enters Douglass High School and is graduated in 2 years. Well, that's an amazing feat. Well, for a 20-year-old, I would say that he was probably more mature than most folks who would be 14 and 15, and he was far more focused than the masses of folks who we know would be of high school age. So 2 years, he completes 4 years of work. When Dr. Carter G. Woodson leaves this particular high school, he eventually comes back and becomes the principal. So these set up the idea of what Dr. Carter G. Woodson, how hard work, how perseverance, how fortitude was ingrained in him through his parents who were of that particular party that were slaves. So the hard work of former slaves led to the brilliance of a former educator who now goes down in our history as a hero. So when we understand clearly Dr. Carter G. Woodson and what he meant to do, we now can look backwards and get a very clear picture of how brilliant he was in creating Negro History Week, February 26th. This is what we know directly to be the start of Black History Month. So I want to kind of revert back and go back to where he earned his bachelor's degree, Barrera College in Kentucky in 1903, taking classes part-time. He has served as one who worked in the Philippines, so he was becoming from a slave, from parents of slaves to a formally educated person who became international. So his greatness is continuing to grow. And if we understand fully, Dr. Carter G. Woodson in 1915 in Chicago, which is a connection to this area, only about 2.5 hours up the road, when we understand Dr. Carter G. Woodson, and he creates the Association for the Study of African Life and History, ASALH, 1915. So today, 2015, the annual conference for ASALH will be held 100 years from 1915 to 2015 will be held this year, November, in Atlanta. So these are historical things. So now it's been 100 years since Dr. Carter G. Woodson understood that there should be a study for the African. There should be a specific study for what had those Africans and those who had been made Negroes, what they left behind historically in an accurate sense, which leads us right to February 1926 and the creation of Negro History Week. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson chose February to host Black History, Negro History Month, because of his connection to two very famous individuals. Dr. Carter G. Woodson had an affinity for Abraham Lincoln as well as Frederick Douglass. So his connection to both of these particular people and his symbolic use of February ties into both of their greatness. He talked about President's Day, Abraham Lincoln's celebration, and that was the connection. He also talked about his affinity and his liking and the way he admired Frederick Douglass. And Frederick Douglass' birthday, so-called birthday, was February 14th, 1818. So when we talk about specifically using February as the backdrop for Black History Month, it connects to two very great men. Now, here's Dr. Carter G. Woodson's brilliance surfacing. He thought very seriously that blacks and the accomplishment of blacks should be accurately portrayed during February to celebrate Frederick Douglass's birthday and President's Day with Abraham Lincoln so that blacks could be looked to at what they had done in American society and American history and the background and the tapestry of America to come. So when we talk about Frederick Douglass and the greatness of Frederick Douglass and the greatness of Abraham Lincoln, the brilliance of Dr. Carter G. Woodson begins to show. He begins to historically inject the accurate accomplishments of blacks so that they could have a sense of pride, which would in turn allow them to be a part of the American fabric in a positive manner. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson, in himself, his vision, far beyond the normal vision, his education, far beyond the normal education of that time. And one particular historical fact about Dr. Carter G. Woodson, Dr. Carter G. Woodson is the second black man to graduate Harvard University with a PhD. The very first, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, sociology. The second, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, history. So now we're talking about two very great men. February 1926, the beginning of Negro History Week. We understand that he understood the importance of bringing about a self-efficacy that would remove the shame and the hypocrisy of what America had forwarded to blacks during the transatlantic slave trade, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, systematic segregation, which he saw with his own eyes. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson, in himself, leaves a legacy for our children that ties right into the movie Selma. Because if we understand fully, there would be no way to look to Dr. King on his birthday and during February and celebrate Black History Month without the vision of Dr. Carter G. Woodson. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson, second black man to ever graduate Harvard University with a PhD. 1915, he creates Asala. This is the 100-year anniversary. We are indeed indebted to Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Now, let's talk about Black History Week, Negro History Week, turning into Black History Month. That happens in 1976. It transforms. It becomes more commercial. And we know now, today, as well as with the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that it has been placed in a position that we do every year. It's a tradition. So 9 times out of 10 with Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, we go to a breakfast. We say that we're going to do things to help people as Dr. King did on that one day. And then there is Black History Month, where you will find what we call the usual suspects of Negro or Black history. So you'll hear Dr. King's name. And in turn, when you hear Dr. King's name in concert, you will hear Rosa Parks' name. So now we get just a little Malcolm X, which is indeed ironic. Now, irony has its place, and it indeed serves a purpose. But to look to Black History Month and the irony of Malcolm X was killed February 21st, 1965. Malcolm X was also, and more importantly, one of the most hated men on the planet, along with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at the time of both of their demises. And the irony is both of these young men are killed at the age of 39. That's Afro-American, or that's Black history. So when we can forward esoteric information that Dr. Carter G. Woodson said would reflect the accurate accomplishments of blacks, then we have mastered what Negro History Week and how it burgeoned into Black History Month. So now, today, when we talk about Black History Month, we normally talk about the same people. But I say to you, as well as those who understand clearly what history does, history serves as power. History not only serves as power, history serves as the very least of what the future generations should be able to accomplish. It serves as a stick in the mud to what has already been done. But it does not provide vision. It does not provide what we know will allow future generations to be far more successful than the current generations that's teaching them. So Negro history, history in itself, American history has to be taken apart. It has to be dissected by those who are vested in future generations' success. Dr. Carter G. Woodson is that man. He has been that man, and everything from his life reflects. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, one of the greatest educators and historians that America and the world and history has ever seen. So your duty and our duty as gatekeepers to future generations' success is to let them know about Dr. Carter G. Woodson. We erase the myths of why February was chosen, but more importantly, we provide a blueprint that will possess the proclivity to have our generations, our future generations, be far more attuned, be far better than we are today. When we look to Dr. Carter G. Woodson for his exceptional scholarship, there's a coined term by a very brilliant man, Dr. John Holmes Franklin, who talks about history in this manner. He says, when you understand history, you look to history and you say the essence of any scholarship is truth. The truth of Dr. Carter G. Woodson is he is a vital portion of American history, more specifically, Black history, more specifically, the idea of Negro History Week and his vision on what it would do to those folks who would be studying in 2015, a 100-year anniversary after he created Asala, all of these things being left behind, for us to partake, be better people, better parents, better friends, better fathers, better people in general, and far more attuned to history and the purpose that it serves. So I say, for Dr. Carter G. Woodson, February 26, 1926, he allows us to create the backdrop for future generations to understand their brilliance, their greatness, and what it is that will be asked of them in the future, so that we will not be eliminated through history, but we will survive and we will tell the story of the greatest of our great, along with those who will be historical revisionists. Now, there is a big portion that is very lucrative in history that are historical revisionists. They will, for profit, they will, for future power, take stories, inject, take stories and remove and leave the accurate story completely out of the picture. So when you find those historical revisionists, you find perhaps the most dangerous person in the quandary of history. So those of us who completely understand what Dr. Carter G. Woodson left behind, then we understand his greatness. We also understand the fight that Dr. Carter G. Woodson had, being a child of a former slave to end up being the second Black man to graduate Harvard University with a PhD. This is indeed worthy of our research with humorless fervor for the younger generations to find heroes who look just like them. Dr. Carter G. Woodson is a very popular person. So after we study Dr. Carter G. Woodson, after we study Dr. Martin Luther King, then we will find ourselves to link to other folks who are far more esoteric, but as important in the tapestry of American history. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson, and what we will do with his brilliant thought during February, please allow yourself to, if that's the gist of it, see the movie Selma. But that cannot be the end. You have to be very serious about your children and what information, strategies, and techniques they will get their hands on and how it will affect them in the long run. How it will affect the way that their psyches will be released from captivity and crisis of American history. The lies my history teacher told. The lies my history teacher continues to tell. Dr. Carter G. Woodson will, from the very beginning, remove those half-truths, falsehoods, and wicked lies by his scholarship. And we have to create a cadre of young people who understand his brilliance. That means that you have to sit down and discuss it with them. And you have to be able to find them where they are. So to find our students and our young folks where they are, please infuse technology. Get on the computer and allow them to look at a picture of Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Allow them to look at the brilliance of Dr. Carter G. Woodson. And I will, in general, say to you, do something this particular month that you have, and during February, that you have yet to do as those of us who are adults. So step outside of your comfort zone. Remove yourself from what it is that you know to be easy upon your mental, easy upon what it is that you'll study, and study something that perhaps may not be as easy to digest. Be able to forward to the youngest person who's watching now the importance of February 1926, Negro History Week, and how today we can, as individuals, recognize the importance of Dr. Carter G. Woodson, recognize his brilliance, and recognize without question what it will do for future generations. Now, I have to say, Dr. Carter G. Woodson is indeed one of our greatest of the great, and he continues through his written work and through his idea of what future generations would get their hands on to be one of our stalwarts and one that we cannot look to with passivity. We have to look to him with crucial dialogue. We have to look to him for exactly what he was worth. And his brilliance continues to reign. And we need to go to 1933 and perhaps his most popular work, The Miseducation of the Negro. This particular book is imperative, especially, and I'll take time for this, for all of you black educators, for all of you all who are in a formal classroom, for all of you all who go to conferences to make yourself a lot better and have yet to read The Miseducation of the Negro. During February, please find a way to get your hands on that book, which was produced in 1933, around a lot of controversy, because what he did was he made it very plain. And he talks about it in chapter 1. He talks about it, now I'm going to paraphrase, he talks about it in chapter 1, but the title of chapter 1 is The Seat of Trouble. And he talks about how formal education and those of us who partake in formal education are taught to admire the Hebrew, we are taught to admire the Teuton, we are taught to admire the European, but we are taught in that particular education to have a disdain for our own people. The miseducation of the Negro. We have indeed had some serious bouts in education that have miseducated several generations. For those who are educators, you perhaps have already had your hands on this classic work, but it is not being forwarded to our younger generation in a manner that will allow for them to take the best out of it and leave the rest out of it. I wholeheartedly urge you, encourage you to make sure that you can read that volume, that it should be mandated for any black educator that is going into a college classroom, a high school classroom, a grammar school classroom, or going in front of any group of young black students. This must be mandated. So when we continue to understand our duty and we look to Dr. Carter G. Woodson as a backdrop, we look to what he left behind. We read the volumes of his work. We make our children attuned to his greatness. How much can we improve our current situation by looking to education for what it really is? I say to you, without hesitation, enjoy February. But enjoy February, Black History Month, as a time to be far more diligent about understanding what it is our youngest will face, preparing them for it in earnest, while understanding our duty as gatekeepers. I have to say, when we speak of Dr. Carter G. Woodson, you're talking about one of my favorite historians, and I thank him deeply for those who are voiceless. I thank him without hesitation for for those people who have attempted to minimize or erase him from history. We won't allow that. And I say, most importantly, that Dr. Carter G. Woodson, his classic works, will continue to reverberate. We must put them in their proper light so they have the lessons in order to raise the masses' consciousness and make them far better as understanding future generations and what they will face. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, well worthy of our time, our research, and well worthy of our appreciation, applause, and love. So I thank Dr. Carter G. Woodson. And for any of his scions or family members that are still around, we really appreciate every connection that Dr. Carter G. Woodson has left us to greatness. I say to Dr. Carter G. Woodson, job well done, job well done, God is pleased. Ladies and gentlemen, this information may in no means change your mind, but because truth and you are so important to me, I just thought you ought to know. I remain, with esteem and respect, Frederick Douglass Dixon, a distinguished man of color. Thank you, Dr. Carter G. Woodson.